Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your boy Preston here. So like this is just gonna be its own it's gonna be just its own long video, and shit like that. To be honest with you, because I was supposed to do this video. I was supposed to do this video a long time ago, but again, I'm a little delayed. I'm pretty delayed on the video, and shit like that, But we're gonna start off with actually no, we're not gonna do that, and shit like that. We're just gonna go individual, and shit like that, But the fight I am going to talk about is David Morrell versus Imam Khataev. This is a fight where I'm actually, I am also looking forward for this fight. I said it in my last video, and shit like that, that I'm really looking forward to this fight, and shit like that, because it's a good fight, man. It's a very, very good, it is a good fight. It's a good buildup of a fight, because after a loss of David Benavidez, this is a good stepping stone for David Morrell to still keep him on the map, and shit like that, and that's the thing, because Khataev, he got good power, good boxing skill, and shit like that. He has good pressure boxing, and shit like that, where he goes forward against you, and then he just throws his hands and he just walks through you with his punches, which he's really, really fucking good. Like Imam Khataev, I never seen him fight before, but now I seen him fight. He's really good, Imam Khataev. And I'm definitely looking forward for this fight, and shit like that, and that's the thing and shit like that, But what these fighters need to do to win, or let me say that these guys' record: David Morrell, 11-1, 9 knockouts. Only loss came from David Benavidez, and shit like that, which is obviously, we know how tough of a fighter David Benavidez is, and shit like that, and that's not a bad loss, that's David Benavidez right there, and shit like that, and that's the thing and shit like that, 11-1 with 9 knockouts. Imam Khataev, 10-0 with 9 knockouts, and shit like that, so both of these fighters have 9 knockouts, and shit like that, I mean, Imam, it has a little bit of a higher knockout percentage, but that doesn't mean he has more power, and shit like that, and overall, I mean, I don't know, though, because Khataev, he got that power, man, and shit like that, Morrell this is one of the fights where David Morrell isn't going to be the only person that's going to have this power, and shit like that, Morrell isn't going to be the only person that's going to have this power, and shit like that, and that's the thing and shit like that, and, yeah, so this is going to be a very, very tough fight, and shit like that, but my prediction for this fight, and shit like that, I mean, overall, I don't really need to go score by score, or I'm going to still go score by score, but either way, David Morrell should win, and shit like that, because, this isn't a fighter that's bigger than him and that can fight from distance against him, and shit like that, David Morrell is significantly taller than Khataev, because looking at Khataev is well, I don't know, though, and shit like that, Actually, let me go look. Yes, because Khataev, he's 5'9.5", 5'10", because that's the thing, if you look it up, it says, on the according to Wikipedia, it says that Khataev is 5'10", but then when you look up his height, it says 5'9". So I'm guessing overall that he's 5'9.5", or that's what it's gonna say on the fight, that he's 5'9.5". And then David Morrell, he is 6'1", and so that's a significant height advantage. So 9, 10, 11, 6 foot. That's so he's about 3 to 4 inches taller than Imam Khataev, and he has way longer arms. I could just know that easily, that he has way longer arms than Khataev, and shit like that. Khataev has long arms for his type of style, but in general, he doesn't have longer arms than David Morrell. I'm not saying that he's not gonna be able to catch David Morrell, and shit like that. Like, I'm not saying he's not going to be able to catch David Morrell, but it's just more of like David Morrell should be able to have the benefit of the doubt in this fight when it comes down to getting his distance, and shit like that, and keeping his distance, and shit like that. But, that's the thing, but what Morrell needs to do to winning this fight, and shit like that, is that Morrell, he needs to be active with his hands, and shit like that. I mean, this type of fight, I mean, you could try to box, but it's just more of like, I would like to see Morrell again just like go for the kill. I haven't really seen Morrell go for the kill like that, and shit like that, like I would say ever since, the Khataev fight, and shit like that. Ever since the Khataev fight, he's been overly patient with his punches, and shit like that. Like he needs to not do that, and shit like that. Like he needs to box, be patient, but then at the end of the day, you're David Morrell. You're known to being aggressive with your punches, and shit like that, and that's what he needs to do, and shit like that. Because if he does that, I mean, like, overall, Khataev, like, he got to be careful of how much he's keeping him exposed and not putting his hands up, or, not moving his feet, because Khataev, he could catch him with one little shot and could really hurt Morrell. I wouldn't say knock out Morrell, because Morrell seems like he has a pretty good chin. But, I mean, anybody could get knocked out in the sport of boxing, and shit like that, so it's like, that's the thing and shit like that. So he just needs to be careful, with that type of shit, but it's just more of like, just fight how you usually fight, and shit like that, just be smart. Don't just always be up in Khataev's face, but be a lot more active than what you were in the two fights with Khataev, or with Hot Rod Khataev, and David Morrell, and I mean, with David Benavidez, excuse me, with Khataev and David Benavidez. Don't do what you did in those two fights. Be aggressive in this fight, and shit like that. And that's the thing. But yeah, and shit like that. But this is how I see the fight going. Overall, how I see the fight is that I see David Morrell winning the early rounds. And then after that, I see David Morrell winning the mid rounds. But then after that, the later rounds is going to be starting to become a little bit more competitive. But if Morrell can actually want to throw hands in this fight and not just kind of fight scary, and shit like that, like, he should be able to stop Khataev, in my opinion, and shit like that. Because Khataev, like, when it comes down to it in a fight, like, against David Morrell, like, he's going to be very, very exposed against somebody like David Morrell, and shit like that, So... so like when he's gonna, so like overall he's gonna be fighting he's gonna be trying to fight in the inside a lot, and he's gonna try to use whatever type of defense that he can in the inside. But no matter what, if you're fighting in the inside, you're not gonna beat David Morrell, because that's that's where Morrell can just hit you multiple times and just fight in his own pressure fight, and shit like that, and in that way, he's gonna get rid of, of Khataev, and shit like that, But again, it depends of how patient he is. But either way, if he is patient, he should win this fight. But if he's too patient, he's most likely gonna win by a decision, and shit like that. But I want to see him stop Khataev, because I'm very high on David Morrell, and shit like that, and I'm a big fan of David Morrell, and shit like that, and he carries a lot of power, and he can easily get fighters out of there, shit like that. Tough ass fighters, who actually have good chins, and he was able to get him out of there. I want to see that again, and shit like that. You know what I'm saying? Because, yeah, and shit like that, But overall, I'm just going to go with my gut feeling and shit like that. I got David Morrell defeating Imam Khataev by a stoppage in the later rounds. If I'm going to say in the later rounds, I'm probably going to say around around 8 through 10, I would probably say. Out of those, I would probably say round 9. I'll probably say round 9, and shit like that, that he would stop David Morrell. I mean, that he would stop Imam Khataev, David Morrell. That's the round that David Morrell is going to stop Imam Khataev, and shit like that is round 9. But yeah, man, and shit like that, but thank y'all for watching this video. I really have to get on with all these other fights. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. I'm Preston. Peace out, man.